So I'm gonna read Carol. I'm gonna read Carol Singers. It's gonna be like a story. It's a scary Christmas story, so it's pretty much a story. So since it's almost Christmas, I'm gonna read one of these. Here goes my dramatic voice. The Carol Singers is a scary story for Christmas about a kid whose father and grandfather go from door to door and begging for money. It is based on an old horror story by Bernard Capes called The Vanishing House. My grandfather was a drunk, and my father was a drunk, but I never touched a drop. There's a reason for that. When I was young, times were hard, and I grew up poor. My grandfather and father never did any host days work in their lives. Granddad wasn't good for much, but he played the clarinet like an artist. He taught my father how to play the accordion. Every Christmas, they would gather a group of their friends and go to door, playing Christmas music, singing Christmas carols, and begging for money. Afterwards, they would all go down to the pub and spend it on alcohol. One Christmas Eve, they brought me with them. I was too young to play an instrument, so they handed me a triangle and told me to strike it every now and then. The night was dark and snow was falling, and a cold December wind cut through us like a knife. We kept our heads down and trudged through the snow and the sleet. Eventually, my grandfather stopped and said, "This looks like a good place as any. We should outside. We were outside a big mansion decorated with Christmas lights." My grandfather knocked on the door, and we began to play some old Christmas carols. The door of the house swung open, and in the dim light, I saw a young woman standing there. She was holding a tray of glasses in her hands with a smile. She picked up her glass and held it out, inviting one of the men to drink. My grandfather rubbed his hands together with glee and took the glass. Just then, I looked up, and in the window above, I saw a face peering out of the shadows, a face that was hideous beyond words. I looked back into the woman in the doorway, and her face was hideous too. Before I could even stop him, my grandfather pulled out his glass to his lips and knocked it out with one big gulp. "Oh dear," said the woman in an eerie child voice. "You're too drunk, blood, sir." With that, the door slammed shut. My grandfather stumbled backwards, and the glass fell into his hand. It shattered with a deafening crash and collapsed in the snow. I don't remember much after that. All I can recall is waking up in the light of dawn and finding myself lying in the snow. The other men were lying all around me, just waking up themselves. My father got to his feet and rubbed his head. The woman had disappeared, and the house was boarded up and abandoned. All that was left was a dark red stain in the show where the glass had broken. My grandfather lay there in the snow beside it, his face all purpled and swollen. He was as dead as a doornail. He hurried home in the morning and called the police. They picked up my grandfather's body and brought it to the mortuary. My father told them what had happened, but they didn't believe a word of his tale. They said the house has been vacant for over 100 years. After the night, my father was never to see him, never the same man again. He never let up another drop of alcohol, touched his lips, and made him. I did the same. Okay, that only took like 5 minutes. Wow. Okay, let's do another one. This one is called Girls' Night Out. Isabella and Chloe were two typical American teenagers. After school, they would spend all their time together, watching scary movies, having sleepovers, shopping for new clothes. They liked pottering, keeping up with their friends, having fun, and enjoying life. They had no way of knowing the horrible fate in life they had in store for them. One night, Isabella and Chloe decided to have a girls' night out. They planned to sneak out of the nightclub, and as soon as their parents went to sleep, Isabella kissed her parents goodnight and went upstairs to bed. When she thought that everyone had gone to sleep, she took her cell phone and called her friend Chloe and told her to meet her at the store down the street. Chloe agreed and hanged up. Isabella quietly opened her bedroom window, trying not to wake anyone. She stepped out into the window sill and climbed out the drain pipe. And she walked down the deserted street. She even got a strange feeling that she was being watched. The hair on her back of her neck pricked up. The glance behind her, but she was alone. When she came to the corner of the store, there was nobody around. So she took out her cell phone and called Chloe. "Okay, I'm at the store," she said. "Hurry up, I'm going home." "What's wrong?" asked Chloe. "I don't know," replied Isabella. "This just doesn't feel like other nights. Something isn't feel right. I've got a bad vibe." "Stop it. You're just being paranoid," I laughed Chloe. "I'll be there in 2 minutes." Isabella hung up the phone, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her. 5 minutes later, Chloe turned up and the two girls walked together into the nightclub. The girls were too young to get in the club, but the bouncers never asked them for ID. They were strolled inside, and pretty soon they were dancing to the music and flirting with guys on the dance floor. Around 3 a.m., Isabella was chatting to the really cute guy, who must have been at least 10 years older than her. Suddenly, she felt her phone vibrating in her pocket. It was a text message from her ex-boyfriend, Anthony. She hadn't heard him since they broke up a month ago. The text read, Come outside, I've got a huge surprise for you." Curious, she looked around and saw Chloe busy talking to some other man. So, throughout saying goodbye, Isabella walked out to the door of the club. She had taken a few steps and received another message. It read, "Meet you around the corner over by the dumpster." The street was dimly lit and deserted. Isabella had a bad feeling in the pit of her stomach. Something didn't feel right, but she told herself she was being overcautious. Into the nightclub, Chloe was looking for her friend. After waiting for 15 minutes, she began to grow impatient. She scanned the dance floor, but there was no sign of her. She even checked the toilets, but they were empty. At 3:27, a revealed Chloe got a text message from Isabella. It read, "Meet outside now, hurry." When Chloe got outside, she received another text. "I'm around the corner over by the dumpster. Come watch me sparkle." Chloe followed the direction, crossing the dark and lonely street. When she rounded the corner, she was confronted by a horrific sight. Her heart almost froze in her chest. Isabella was hanged upside down. From the street light up in the parking lot behind the dumpster, sparkling Christmas tree lights were wrapped around her ankles. There was a large pool of blood below her. Her body was completely stripped of clothing, revealing deep wounds along her stomach and chest. Chloe fell to the ground and began screaming horrifically. Some people who were standing in the door in the nightclub heard her cries and came rushing over. They turned the corner and saw Isabella's corpse hanging in the front of them. They were horrified. The police were called and questioned Chloe for hours, still in a state of hysteria. She could barely talk, sobbing uncontrollably. She told them how and Isabella had sneaked out that night and gone to the nightclub together. She tried to remember all the guys they had talked to, flirted with them on the dance floor, but they asked her if she knew of anyone who would to harm Isabella. But she couldn't think of anyone. As much as she wanted to catch Isabella's killer, she was of no help to investigation. During the investigation, one of the cops introduced a plastic bag and took out a blood-stained envelope. "We found this lodged at your friend's throat. It addresses to you," said the cop as she handed the envelope. Chloe was scrawled across the front with trembling hands. She took out the piece of her paper inside and read it. The letter read, "Maybe if you stayed in bed like you were supposed to do, things like this wouldn't happen. Don't go sneaking around at night. Bad things can happen." The cops had to grab her before she fainted. An ambulance took Chloe to the hospital, and she was treated for shock. When Chloe returned home the next day, she was still shaken. Her parents told her that Isabella's ex-boyfriend, Anthony, had arrested for the murder. He was later released after passing a lie detector test. He claimed his phone had been stolen on the day of the murder. The police didn't rule out as a suspect in the case, but they didn't have enough evidence to charge him. As fate would have it, Isabella murder would remain unsolved. Nobody was ever brought to trial for the crime, and as time went on, people came to forget about it. 2 years had passed, and Chloe had almost managed to forget about the terrible night. When her best friend had been savagely murdered, one night she called her boyfriend and asked him to meet her at the park. It was about 2 a.m. She began to walk to the park, but felt a strange presence, just like the one Isabella had told her about. The night she was murdered. She was almost to the park when a strange feeling came across her. So she let it go. Her phone beeped. It was a text message from her boyfriend. "Almost there. Baby loves you a lot." It made her feel so much better. Her last task was to pass by the store. The park was on the other side. She began to walk around, but heard something behind her. Immediately she began to run. Her boyfriend got to the park and waited for about 15 minutes. At 2:35 a.m., he got a message from Chloe. It read, "Kept walking forward, and you will see me." He did as text suggested and walked forward. There, hanging upside down from a tree, was the mutilated body of Chloe. Christmas tree lights were wrapped around her ankles, and she was completely naked and covered in blood. Then he called the police and interrogated all night. The next day, when Chloe's boyfriends got home, there was a letter waiting for him in his parents' doorstep. It was stained with small blood drops. The note said, "Don't go sneaking around at night. Bad things can happen." I wish I could tell you about the murders of Isabella and Chloe were solved, but that's just not the case. Today, the police say the investigation is still ongoing, but they have no new leads. The murders are seldom spoken about nowadays. They were high-profile cases at the time, but due to strange lacks of evidence, people soon forgot about them. Everyone who involved went on their lives. You may be wondering how I know so much about these cases. Well, I'd rather not go into it, considering it was an ongoing investigation. If you must know, I was the cop who was assigned to the case. I was the cop who handled Chloe and the blood-stained letter. Who may also be wondering why the murders were unsolved. Well, like I always say, don't go sneaking around at night. Bad things can happen.